What's going on, folks, and welcome to the Lunchtime live stream. I'm John Kelly. Was the discipleship minister and whatever else Dave wants me to do. I'm really not even sure what my job title is right now. We're still trying to figure that one out. Things have changed a lot at Catalyst over the last year with all the COVID stuff and everything. So for me, I'm one of the ministers on staff at Catalyst. We'll just call it that for right now. One of the things I want to draw your attention to, if you have not been involved at Catalyst for very long, or you haven't been a part of what we're doing here, one of the things that, well, let me see if I can get this to come up here for you. One of the things that we do here is we've got a YouTube or a Facebook channel called Catalyst Life, and that's for members of Catalyst. But we've also posted this on our Catalyst YouTube, or I don't even know what I'm talking about today, our Catalyst Facebook channel and our Instagram. And it asks the question, if your life is in the hands of whoever you pick between these four, justify your answer in the comments. And we have gotten some killer answers today. One of the things that we're really trying to do more of this year is to bring about more engagement online with you guys. With everything that's happening, it's so easy to be stuck at home and not engage with each other, not communicate with each other. And so we want to make sure that even if you're at home right now and you're sheltering at home, you're not going out, that you still have a way to communicate with the people in the church, because that's a big deal. Nice. My wife's Aunt Denise is on here. Hiya, nephew. She loves saying that because she's younger than me. But we got a lot of really cool stuff to talk about today. And so before we do that, I'm going to bring into the chat Mr. Robert Harlemert. How are you, man?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm always good, especially when you're in the chat window with me.
Yes.
That always makes it better.
Well,
always makes it better. So, Rob,
Yeah.
this past week, Dave took some time and he talked about marriage. And I want to kind of step aside from that just for a quick second and say, starting, I think it's February 13th. It's a Saturday event. It's after this series is over. It's actually the Saturday after the last sermon from this series. The sermon series right now is entitled Countercultural Marriage. And right now, marriage in general is countercultural. A lot of people don't believe in it anymore. And I know as a church, we do. And so we want people to understand that marriage is a foundational part of the family and what God set up from the beginning. But we're going to be actually starting a marriage ministry. We have youth ministries. We have children's ministries. We have worship ministries, discipleship ministries. We are starting up a marriage ministry, and that will begin February 13th. That'll start at 10 a.m. on that day. Tomorrow, be looking online. There will be signups tomorrow for that. It's going to be a one-day event, but it's kicking off an entire year of events. And this is something you'll want to do with your spouse. If you're single, there's nothing wrong with coming so that you are prepared to be a better spouse for when you do get married.
Yes.
But this is going to be a really good event. We're going to be catering and food for that. It's also going to be online for all of you who, like I said, are sheltering in place right now, but you still want to be part of it. This will be online. So be sure to be looking out tomorrow on our Facebook and our Instagram with info on how you can sign up for that. Rob, our main thing, in your anger, do not sin. Do not sin. Renee Basham just chimed in, said she can't wait for the marriage ministry to start. I can't wait for it either. Rob, what about that main thing?
I like it. I love it because it reminds me of, I'll fix my camera real quick. It reminds me of when I was in college, because I was an RA for 2 years at the college I went to, and I was in charge of, I don't know how many people, probably 30, 40 guys with another guy. Just make sure that nobody, killed themselves, hurt themselves, destroyed the property. Like, my job wasn't all that much. It was just to make sure the guys weren't, being ridiculous. And my only rule for them, I would look at them at the beginning of every year and said, you guys are adults. You can do what you want. You need to abide by the rules of the college. But the only rule that I have is do not do anything that you wouldn't do just because you're angry. And I specifically said, don't curse when you are angry. So whenever Dave brought that up, it was really cool to just kind of reminisce of college a little bit, of the one rule that I had on the hall. And that was pretty cool. I liked it.
Yeah, that is cool. I know, like, we're talking about marriage, and I know that is one thing where a lot of us kind of struggle. We kind of get in marriages, and you know this. I think we all know this. When you're angry, you tend to have the toughest time being graceful with the people you love the most and spend the most time with.
Yes.
It seems like, and I could be wrong on this, but it seems like it's pretty common that for a lot of us, our largest amounts of anger aren't geared towards, they're not geared towards, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not geared towards other people. They're always thrown at the people we love. They're always thrown at the people that we care about the most because we're so comfortable with them, which is a good and bad thing.
Yes.
So I want to pose the question out there for all of you that are watching right now. What is the dumbest thing that you've gotten angry at your spouse for? What's the dumbest thing you've gotten angry at your spouse for? I'm going to go ahead and go first because
please do.
I've done this. I'm sure, Rob, you've been in this boat before. I remember early on in our marriage, Rhea and I had gotten married. We were getting used to each other, living together. We hadn't done that, so we didn't know certain things. And I'd always heard people say the toilet paper thing would annoy you, but I didn't really think it would. And then one day I went in to use the bathroom, and the toilet paper was turned backwards from the way I like it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I fixed it. I've been living in this house for years. You can't be changing my toilet paper, and so a couple days later, it's changed again. So I go back and I turn it back around. And here's the redeeming part of this whole thing. My wife was not home when I found the toilet paper. So when I got mad and yelled, she wasn't there to be upset with me. she couldn't hear me yelling, "Why did you move the toilet paper again?" It was one of those things where I came out safe from that.
Nice.
Renee Basham. Okay, I've heard of this one. Dreams. I wake up and get mad at something Dream David did, not real David. I've heard of that before. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. What about you, Rob? You ever gotten mad at your wife for something dumb?
I'm sure I have. I'm sure she probably could comment right now of something I've got mad at her for. I think I this one probably brings up more than once, and I don't get mad anymore. But I remember when we first got married, I would get frustrated. She's an avid um, gum chewer. She loves to chew gum. That's her thing.
Nice.
She always has a piece of gum in her mouth. And I remember when we first got married, I would find these gum wrappers just everywhere. And I would make a joke that she was shedding them, that they were a part of her, and they would just all of a sudden one would flake off. And what it was she would have them in her pocket, and she'd take out her phone, and one would fall on the floor. And it's really not that big of a deal. It really hurts nobody. It doesn't matter. But I remember one time, it probably was already frustrated about something else that was going on. And I remember freaking out a little bit on that one. I think that's probably the dumbest thing that I've gotten mad about. Now this is really cool. When one flakes off of her, when she sheds one out, our son picks it up and goes and throws it in the trash can.
Nice. Nice. That's hilarious.
Kaylee didn't like that I shared that story. I apologize.
Did you just get a text?
Yeah, she goes, really?
That's awesome.
Kaylee, you are welcome to share a story of me as well. I'm sure there's
please
many of
do.
them.
Please do. Now, the main crux of what Dave was trying to get at this week is that controlling your anger in your marriage is vital.
Yes.
Is absolutely vital. And he brought up the scripture from James 1:18 through 20. We're coming in about a sentence into this, but it's everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Hold up a second. We got Rob Pemberton. When we were newlyweds, I came home to country music blasting on my boombox. Ended with me grabbing scissors and cutting the cord off. Wow.
Oh, Rob is an avid rocker.
That is impressive.
So
that's impressive.
That's funny.
But there's this whole thing of being quick to listen. And I think there's a reason why that's on there first. It's not the third thing on there. It's the first thing on there.
Yeah.
Because I'm a firm believer that if the first thing you do is listen, you tend not to get as angry and you tend to not have to talk as much.
Yeah.
And I really believe that that's vital. I really believe that's vital for a relationship to be healthy, is the ability to listen. And yet it is probably the one thing, like Dave said on Sunday. I mean, he even said himself, when he is listening to his wife retort or she's upset about something, in his mind, he's already thinking about his comeback.
Yeah.
He's not listening. And I would say that a lot of us do that. I've done that. And it's the fact that we don't listen. We're not actually taking the time to be quiet, hear what's being said, and try and understand that first. Is that fair? Is that fair to say?
No, I agree. Most of the time we're coming up with a response, and once we have a response, we stop listening. And probably 90% of the time, the response had already been answered, and we probably wouldn't have that response if we listened to the rest of what the person said. Because we want to cut off, we want to get our 2 cents in. And if we just probably listened to the whole thing, we wouldn't have said that. And because
you're
we
right.
were quick to respond, it starts and causes some sort of argument or a small frustration starts to boil up. in any relationship. It's not just marriage. That can be in just friends as well.
Yeah.
Coworkers.
I agree with you 100% on that. I agree with you 100% on that. I think it's so easy to want to win.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a huge danger in marriage, the desire to win. I don't think that the desire to win should really have any place in marriage. Um, you're not against each other. You're on the same team. Rhea has said this before. Maybe it was on this chat or it was during one of Dave's other sermons that she sent a text to me. But one of the things we always say to each other is when an argument starts, we look at each other and we just say same team.
Yep.
Because we have to remember that regardless of anything that we're doing, we have to be together.
Yeah.
We're in this for life. So we need to get along. We need to put silliness aside and not allow ourselves the desire to have to win because we're on the same team. When one wins, the other wins. But in this case, when one of us wins, both of us lose.
Yeah.
And so I want to be really careful not to allow that kind of a mindset to bleed into marriage. It's really dangerous. Really dangerous.
I remember in a class we had in college, it was called Conflict and Community. And we went through this whole case study of this church coming to a close because of it started with two secretaries arguing and one wanted to win. And it was like over like something silly, like the color of paper or something like that. It started like that and it just slowly escalated, and it's a crazy book. But the main part that my professor came from that was you got to find in ministry or in leadership or relationships the win-win, where both sides win. He said sometimes in relationships there is a win-lose, where one person wins and one person loses, but it always comes with conflict afterwards. Sometimes, if you're really bullheaded, there'll be a lose-lose, where some person thinks they win, but in reality, it just made every situation worse, as you were talking about.
Yeah.
So I think in our marriages, we always need to look for that win-win, where if there's conflict, where do both of us come out on top and are going in the same direction?
I agree with you 100% on that. 100% on that. I would say that typically by acting out in anger, you're never going to see a win come from lashing out.
No.
And what that usually does is it causes the other person to have the same reaction. So instead of it being something where somebody comments, the other person listens to it, thinks about it, and then calmly speaks back, if it comes as a shout or a yell or something like that, it's what's coming right back is going to be the exact same thing.
Yes.
Now I have found though that in a lot of marriages, mine included, usually you have the cooler head in the marriage, and then you have the loose cannon.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the question to everybody who's watching, and you can just answer cooler head or loose cannon, but which one are you? Are you the cooler head or are you the loose cannon in your marriage? And I will say that it's a 75-25 split in my marriage. I would say 75% of the time I would be the loose cannon and my wife would be the cooler head, and 25% of the time it's flipped.
Yeah.
But I am my father's son, and my father was an emotional, like, lion of a man who just, like, when he felt it, he said it, and he got mad, he would let it out. So I would say that I probably take after my father when it comes to that. And it's something that I can say I've never yelled, like shouted at Rhea. I've never been just downright angry, mean to her. But I would probably say I'm probably more of that than she is. April Price says that she was a loose cannon usually when she was married. And Renee Basham says we're both cooler heads. And I've met Renee and David. That really is.
I believe that.
Yeah, 100% believe that. 100% believe that.
Yeah.
Especially with having 3 kids and with her job where she has to go on a moment's notice to go help children be born. I would dare say that, yeah, she probably is the person who would have to have a cooler head either way.
Yeah.
So what about you, Rob? Which one would you say you are?
Ours is definitely based on circumstance rather than a personality, I would say. So depending on what's going on in our lives, whether, work is stressful or things aren't going well, I would definitely say if things are going well in our work life or personal life, uh, we're a lot cooler, or I'm a lot cooler. And if things are stressful, things are going well, I have the ability to be a loose cannon, and
Yeah.
I have done that before. I can't speak for my wife on that. I can tell when she's irritated, but I wouldn't say that she's a loose cannon. I would say that
Okay.
she is still pretty calm and collected. Um, I have got her mad before, but I started it. So
But you started it. Nice.
I did. I would say I'm the one that starts it. If she's going to be considered a loose cannon, it's because I did something.
And Marty Allen said he's a loose cannon in his marriage. And if you know Kim, I get that too.
Yeah.
But I also know, I know Kim Allen, and I also know I don't want to tick her off either. Because she may be small in stature, but that's a tough woman, and
Yeah,
I'm not messing with her. I'm just going to be straight there, Uh,
I agree.
I would say, we're talking about being a loose cannon and all that. I would say 99.99999% of loose cannon behavior comes from misunderstanding. Sometimes it's not even something bad was done. It's the thought that something bad happened.
Ooh.
Or the somebody said that this happened, or you know where I'm coming from on this? Like, it just
Yeah.
a lot of times when we get mad about things, if we just calm down and talk about it, we find out there was nothing really to be upset about. And yet that's what we do. Let's see what we got going on here. Lisa Sayre, I would say our personalities in these moments come from the situation of what is going on. Depends on how invested, passionate, hurt, etc. that we are in whatever we have an argument or discussion about. Yeah, I agree with that. I would agree with that 100%. Mithu Sarkar, watching from Bangladesh.
Oh, hello.
That's really cool. Hello from the U.S. And Marty Allen, mine was poor upbringing. I had to overcome the people that raised me. We've actually talked about that. Marty did have a rough upbringing, and we definitely learned from our parents. And the way we react to things is many times, if not all the time, based on what we saw our parents do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we want to take this into the realm of parenting as well, you want a better behaved, easier to deal with kid. Be a better behaved, easier to deal with adult. April Price, my problem was I understood too much. I get that. I can get that. So here's another scripture that Dave used when he was talking on Sunday, and this is the one I kind of want to kind of talk about more through the end of our discussion here.
Okay.
And that's Ephesians 4:26. Do not let the sun go down on you while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Now, where I want to go with this is something I think that is poison. And I think you and I talked about this for about 15 minutes before we went live. But let's see. Renee, I call false. Have you met my 3-year-old? That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's really funny. But one of the most important reasons to get things under control before you go to bed, before you allow the sun to go down on your anger, is we all do this thing when we can't talk to each other. We all do this thing when we can't be around each other. And there are a lot of people who do this. And I'll be honest, since COVID started, it's happened a lot where because we aren't seeing each other face to face, because we aren't talking to each other as much, because we are only seeing Facebook posts or Instagram posts or hearing about things, we start doing this thing and it's called assumption. And if we don't get a grip on our anger before we have time to think about it, there's that ability to assume. And there's that ability to assume the worst, because when we're angry, we don't typically think as intelligently as we would on a normal occasion. And so it seems like for most people that when we get angry and we start to assume, we always go to the negative. Well, I mean, what do you think about that? Am I off base here, or what's your thought on that?
No, you're right. I always say to my students, the thing I've always said since I've been here at Catalyst is that if you live your life assuming, you'll live a miserable life. And I say it to my students all the time whenever they bring up something, and I'm like, "Do you know that, or are you just assuming that's going to happen?" And I'm like, "Don't assume, because you're just putting yourself in a miserable situation for no reason." I like what Dave mentioned. I can't remember. Maybe it was a Facebook post. Maybe he said it online that 92% of things that you worry about, which are assumptions, don't actually happen.
Right.
And so why we walk around just assuming is very, very dangerous. And the worst is what you're talking about when you go to bed. You're not only frustrated with that person's sitting next to you, laying next to you. And
And if they're snoring, you're getting even more angry.
oh yeah, any little movement, you're like, I can't believe they're
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
I can't believe that they're twitching their feet. I can't believe they took the covers off me. And then you yank the covers back harder. It's like acting like every little movement's a dig at you when it's not.
I think that's the moment when we act the most like children. I've
Yeah.
got I've got a 3-year-old and a soon to be 3-year-old.
Yeah.
They're gonna be 3 at the same time for about a month. But man, when they get angry, yesterday I saw something happen I'd never seen happen with my kids.
Ooh, good story.
I called Rhea at work to find out, to just tell her, hey, when you're heading home, give me a shout so I can put the food in the oven. Tiny little message, nothing big.
Yeah.
But as I called her, the moment she answered, I heard my daughter from the bathroom scream at Jack so much and go running at him that it actually scared me. And so I ran in. She never touched him, but she screamed so loud, it scared him and he started crying.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he had picked up one of her toys or had played, because we had just gotten their last bit of Christmas this past week. We got to go spend a day or two with Rhea's father and do Christmas with him, which we hadn't been able to do yet.
Yeah.
And so the kids had their new toys, and oh my gosh, I mean, it was blood curdling. You would have thought she I don't know. It was like out of a horror movie. And so she ran over, screamed at him, and he's in tears strictly out of the fear of his sister's anger. and sometimes it's just, I see that and I'm like, okay, that's a 3-year-old. That's what they do. But how many times as adults, we allow ourselves to get angry and then we assume the worst, and then we lash out based on assumption and not real solid facts. Dennis Herco just commented, some solid scriptures for marriage and life in general. How much better would our marriage and lives be if we live by these scriptures? Yeah, 100%. For those of you that don't know, Dennis is one of our missionaries here at Catalyst.
Yep.
Herco Family Mission down in Jamaica, one of the most awesome missions we know of, and we are wanting to plan another trip to head down, folks. 2020 robbed our last trip, but we're going to plan a new one, and this won't be men only. So for those of you ladies who've been wanting to get down there, be prepared. We'll be working on that here in the near future. Renee, for me, technology has helped some. Very little. She puts that in parentheses. But I have typed out replies, then deleted and either ignored or changed my response to a softer response. But one of my strong traits is I'm able to see other perspectives easily. That's good. That's good. Marty Allen snoring. And then
Yeah.
what Renee said. Um, Renee Allen said, if he's mad, he gets bothered by my daughter for looking at him. And he screams too. So,
Yeah.
so I think the real danger in assumption, and this is something I just want to say, the real danger in assumption isn't that you're assuming, it's that you believe your assumption. I think that is the problem. We can assume, but if cooler heads prevail, we realize that's dumb and we stop.
Yeah.
The problem is when we assume and then we run with it.
Yeah.
We assume the worst and then that becomes fact and we just chase after that like we have to go there. Rob Pemberton said, when worried, scared, hurting, I tend to be quiet and withdrawn. My spouse almost always thinks I'm mad at her, even if I'm not.
Dave mentioned that in his sermon.
Yep, he did talk about that.
Yeah.
He talked about being withdrawn. Rob, I mean, what's your dealings with assumption when it comes to couples specifically?
Yeah, assuming within couples it seems like it shouldn't happen because you're with each other all the time.
Yeah.
Like the hard is you would think that you could just look at the other person and ask them a question and get the answer immediately, and then there's no reason to assume ever. So that's something that doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. I assume just like everybody else does. But one thing I often do, and John is often the recipient of this, is not necessarily in marriage, but in general, if something happens and I am coming up with a response or question or something, I normally go into John's office and I give him 2 or 3 possible outcomes of what's going to happen. I don't just assume the worst. I do bring up the worst thing that could happen, but I often bring up 2 or 3 better things that might come out of it. And I do that so that my mind isn't only on the negative.
Yeah.
I think of the negative because it's a possibility. And I always say, I really hope this isn't the case. And I always bring up more positives than negatives.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are an assumer, if you like to assume things, why don't you assume the best? I think that could change a lot of things. Going into a conversation, assuming the best, it often happens. 1, and 2, if you go into something assuming the best and the worst happens, your reaction will be a lot better because you haven't been stewing on the negative for X amount of time.
Yeah, and I think that's a big point to bring up too, is when we assume, we dwell.
Yeah.
And the last thing we want to do is dwell in the negative, especially in marriage. There are so many couples right now that are struggling.
Yeah.
COVID wasn't just a physical thing. COVID was very much a spiritual thing this last year and how it affected people.
Yeah, I agree.
People who have been friends for years are no longer friends because of ideological or political reasonings. Married couples were stuck in a house together for the first time in their married life and didn't know how to coexist 24/7.
Yeah.
And as a result, got sick of each other, got mad at each other, did the things that we're talking about right now where they just assumed the worst all the time. And because they couldn't escape each other, they would have to face it, but they didn't face it well.
Yeah.
And so, man, this is a season where marriage has been on trial. We know personally several couples who are going through divorce right now or who have been through it because of this. It's been hard.
Yeah.
It's been really hard. You know, we think about COVID and we think about people getting sick and some of the folks who have already had the bad health that have gotten it and then passed away. We think about the isolation that some people feel, but something we don't talk about much is what it's doing to the family unit. In some families, they've been flat out waging war on each other. And it's kind of scary that stuff like that is happening. Lisa just put up here, I feel like we have to constantly defend ourselves, and assuming the worst helps us to feel like we are prepared for everything and all possible outcomes. Interesting. But don't defend yourself, rather defend your marriage. Nice. I think there's a real danger. I want to go back to her original one. We have to constantly defend ourselves, and assuming the worst helps us to feel like we are prepared for everything and all possible outcomes. I think you have to be very careful with that sometimes. Very careful. Because when you constantly live your marriage in defense, in a defense mechanism, that means you feel like the other person is on the offense, which means you're assuming that person is coming at you.
Yeah.
And that is dangerous. You definitely don't want to see your spouse as somebody who is after you, who's coming at you and wants to be your enemy. You got to be really, really careful with that. I do like the fact that Lisa said, don't defend yourself, defend your marriage.
Yeah.
Don't allow assumption to poison your brain in such a way where you don't realize that there's a bigger picture here than just this argument.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a relationship on the line, and that relationship is way more important than being right about an argument.
Agreed.
So, Marty, there's some really good things you can do when you're cooped up together.
Yeah.
He's not wrong about that.
I love
He's
eating
not
cookies.
wrong about that. What's that?
I love eating cookies.
Oh, yeah.
Cookies.
Yeah. Let's see. That's why I've been so busy lately, Marty Allen. It's 9 to 10 months after quarantine started. That's funny. We'll just leave that where it is. Rob, in your marriage with Kaylee,
yeah,
and you guys have a really strong marriage. You really do. What do you think? Trying to think of the best way to word this. If you were to best sum up the way you guys deal with conflict, what would that be?
We bring it up quite often. And most of the time I ask a question, or she does. She asks a question way before things could potentially come up. I think there are some assumptions that happen within our marriage. But I think we do a pretty good job of talking about those assumptions well in advance. When we talk about like church planning or having another kid, or we talk about the assumptions that just come up in our life.
And just so that they're not pregnant.
No.
So he talks about having another kid. That he's not saying if they're pregnant and having another kid.
No.
So let's not let you guys assume anything on that one and start putting that out online or anything that all of a sudden Rob and Kaylee are pregnant, because they are not.
Assume away. You'll just.
So we just had this conversation yesterday. So I just wanted to put that out there since we're talking about assumption. So go ahead. Sorry.
Mentioning things that couples talk about.
Right.
Church planning and having kids.
Yeah. Because all couples talk about church planning. Right.
Yeah. There's some like worries, I guess, that come with those, specifically for our relationship and the things that we've dealt with over the past 7 years of being married. So we try to bring them up early and often. I thought I saw Rob glowing a little bit. Nice.
The church is talking to us. That's new.
Dave.
Hi, Catalyst. Dennis, do not focus on the negatives in your marriage. Try to focus on the good things. What is it you like about your spouse?
Yeah, that
absolutely.
That does help. Well,
Dennis actually did our marriage counseling.
I'm sure he did a great job with that.
It was incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Well, whenever if you're just talking about the negative things, if you have an assumption, ask. I try to tell her that. I said, don't assume that I'm going to do anything for you. If you want me to do something or want me to help you with something, just ask me. Don't assume I'm going to do it, because then you'll probably, most of the time, you'll be disappointed because I won't do it in the time that you want me to do it or how you want me to do it.
Or you may not even do it because you're not thinking about it.
Or that. which is probably most of the time. I was like, if you want help, or if you want me to do something, just mention it to me. That's probably been the best thing in our marriage. Probably some of the things we have the most conversations about, because I want to be there and I want to support her in the best way that I can. And this is for all marriages, but you can't support your spouse if you don't know how they need to be supported in that moment.
Right.
Especially, I really struggle with this. Dave and I have talked about that. I don't pick up on cues, the female cues, very well. I've never been overly strong about that. So I always ask my wife. I can't read your mind.
Rob
Yes,
Pemberton.
it's true.
It's perfect timing on that
Hey,
comment.
some men are good at are very good. I think my dad's pretty good at it, reading my mom's mind.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing you need to understand about guys, April. Don't hint. Just say it.
Yeah.
We don't get hints. Like
I don't get
I'm
it.
just telling you, as a guy, guys don't get hints because we don't get hints.
Yeah.
Just say it. Just come out and say it. And your wife left a comment on here. Says, I think bringing up the conversation before you have a chance to let it fester is the best thing we do. We bring up what's bothering us before we get angry. In the past, I've had a bad problem with assuming he is doing something on purpose, when in actuality, he had no idea he's doing it. I love that.
I need examples.
That's so normal though, man. Like that's exactly what we're talking about is, you know, you assume, oh, well, they're just not doing this just because they're being mean or blah, blah, blah. Well, the truth is, I didn't realize I wasn't doing that.
I know one thing that Kaylee and I have struggled is this is a me thing, where she will tell me something because of the circumstance. And it's only true for like a certain time period or circumstance, but I take it as it's a universal thing. So this never has happened, but a great example would be like if the trash day was a certain day, but there's a holiday, and she's like, hey, the trash goes out today. If I never asked another question, I was like, oh, I guess the trash day got changed if I didn't know that there was a holiday. And I would always be late one day because I took it as fact. And there's been a lot of things in our marriage where it's just like that, where she will mention something and then I will just continue to do it. And she will say, why do you keep on doing that? I'm like, oh, I guess I never thought that maybe that would end at one point. And that's not her fault. That's just me being me.
Dave said, take no offense when none is intended. And 99% of the time there's none intended, which is true. I mean, that's so true. I mean, if you really love your spouse, you're not trying to offend your spouse.
Yeah.
That is not your intention. I will say something that I assumed that wasn't a bad thing. I just assumed something based on our premarital counseling. Like I said, Dennis and Mary Herco did our premarital counseling, and they had us, we had so much homework to do. You know, we had so much stuff to write out about things that we like and that we don't like. And this, before we were married, Rhea had mentioned that she didn't like roses. And so when she said that, in my mind was, Rhea doesn't like flowers. Ooh. So I never got her flowers, ever. And we're in the middle of premarital counseling, and she writes down, like, what do you wish he would do more of? She goes, I wish he would surprise me with flowers every once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought she didn't like flowers, you know, and so, and it, you know, it wasn't one of those things that was detrimental to the relationship or anything, but a lot of times we hear something.
Yep.
Or I should say, let's say it again. Words come out of their mouths and we hear something else.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of times our spouse is talking to us and they say something and what we hear isn't necessarily what they just said. Yeah. She said, I don't like roses. I heard, I don't want flowers.
Yes.
Which
that's what I was talking about. Exactly.
Complete failure on my part. But that is exactly what happens a lot of time in communication in marriage. And so it's so important, regardless of what the situation is. If something happens and it seems like it's out of character for your spouse, it's probably better that you ask them what's going on
Yeah.
than get mad about it, because chances are if it's out of character for your spouse, then there's probably nothing intended negative.
Correct.
And there's probably nothing bad about what happened. It was just a confusion. It was a misunderstanding. Very rarely do two people who love each other, genuinely love each other, intentionally hurt each other.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's one of those things that people just need to understand in their marriages. If you go into marriage thinking that they're trying to hurt you,
Yes.
you need to take a step back, reevaluate your marriage, and then fix that, because that's a problem. That's what you call a root problem.
Yeah.
Because the problem isn't the argument. The problem isn't the shouting match. The problem is the basis of your mindset around your marriage and where it takes you. And so that's vitally important. So I want to come back real quick after talking about all that. The main thing, in your anger, do not sin. We talked about the anger. We talked about why the anger is bad, but it's those last 3 letters, do not sin, that I want to talk about. When you read the do not sin part, Rob,
Can you be more specific? Ask that question one more time in a different way for me.
how does your anger, like how are you sinning when you're angry? When you allow your anger to take root, what sin does that develop? What does that develop in you? How does that affect marriage directly? What is that? What are those 3 words, do not sin? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, it mostly for me is uh, the thing we should do is forgive. So it's probably the lack of forgiveness is what I go to immediately. So like the festering and stuff like that you're talking about, this is a lack of forgiveness. Like even like in anger, if we're beyond assuming, like something actually was done to me that made me angry towards my wife or towards another relationship that I have with a friend or coworker. It's the not immediate forgiveness that should come out of my heart is
Yeah.
probably the sin that I think mostly of.
Yeah, I kind of take it and I take that last word sin and I replace it with specific sins.
Yeah.
So in your anger, do not shout. In your anger, do not assume. In your anger, do not get jealous.
Yes.
In your anger, do not abuse. In your anger, do not freak out. You know, it's so easy to see in your anger, do not sin. So don't get angry. Well,
Yeah.
it's not so much don't get angry. You're going to get angry. Like that's sorry, folks. You're human. It's coming. You're getting angry. But it's your reaction to anger. That's the big one. I like this. Lisa said, do not pay back. Do not hurt. Do not feel any malice or ill will towards them. Absolutely. Dave kind of did this a little bit on Sunday with what he was talking about. It's that whole thing of the anger isn't always the problem. It's the reaction to that anger.
Yeah.
And that reaction to the anger comes out of things like assumption. The anger isn't always the problem. That's not always the problem. The problem is how we deal with the anger.
Yeah.
And so it's vitally important that we as married couples, especially in the church, if there's one place where marriage should look different, it would be in the church. Period. It would absolutely be in the church. April Price just said, I like that I can use this message with my kids also, where my anger is. Yeah, we can get frustrated with our kids.
Yes.
That's for sure. That's absolutely for sure. And so if there's ever a place where there needs to be a light for marriage, it would be in the church. I would hope that if people are looking for healthy marriage, where are they going to go to look for that? They're going to go to the church.
Yeah.
If they're going to look for joyous people, where do you want them to go? The church. If you want to see people filled with grace, where do you want to see that? In the church. So I think all of this is just a wake-up call for all of us. I think it's more of a call to arms than anything of remember who we are and whose we are. And in your marriage, it's the same thing. Remember who you are and whose you are. Even in your marriage, you're representing Christ. You're not just married to that person. You are spiritually responsible for that person, especially as men, as husbands. We are spiritually responsible for our families. God has told us that. And so we've got to be real careful as men, especially just not to fly off the handle and freak out and treat our wives poorly and make them feel bad about themselves. One of the biggest frustrations women have is that their husbands make them feel like they're not pretty.
Yeah.
You know, and that's dangerous. As men, we got to be better. And I'm not saying women don't have to be better. You do too. If anything, as parents, your kids are watching. So you're going to be Christ not only to your husband or wife, but you're going to be Christ to your kids. So vital stuff, man. Vital stuff. Any closing thoughts on your part for today?
I don't think so this time. It was.
Oh man,
it was a good. It's not an easy conversation.
Yeah,
because nobody likes to look inside to see their self and make sure that we're not sinning in anger, and we're not make sure we are treating our spouse correctly, and always, because you'll always find something.
Yeah. If you're looking for it, you'll always find it.
You will always find it.
That's the truth. One last comment here. Rob Pemberton said, for me, fear almost always preceded anger. Fear of not getting what I want or losing something I have. That's 100% true.
It's probably the core of a lot of things.
It really is. And I would go on to say it's fear of being in control.
Yeah.
When we feel like we're losing control of a situation, that almost always leads to anger. And Dave, if you don't say it, you don't have to apologize. So much just doesn't need to be said. Yep, 100%. So, Rob, I'm going to go ahead and let you get off here. I'm going to throw a few announcements at everybody so they know what's going on.
Sounds good.
And, but I appreciate you being in here again, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
See you, buddy. All right. So just real quick, just want to throw this out here for everybody. We are getting ready to enter a new season of the church. We're getting ready to start a marriage ministry. This series was very intentional. We realized that last year was a very difficult year for so many people. And because it was so rough, and especially on marriages, we realized that we want to start 2021 off talking specifically about marriage. And so that's why we're doing it. And then, like I said earlier, not all of you were in at that time, but on February the 13th, we're starting our marriage ministry. It's something that's just going to be like a youth ministry or a children's ministry, a worship ministry. It is a ministry of the church directed solely at married couples and marriages. And so what we want to do is we're going to get everybody together on that day, the 13th, and it'll be at 10 o'clock. Lunch will be served. There will be a cost, but you're going to be paying for your lunch, and it will be catered in, and it will be really good. And we're not talking McDonald's. We're talking some seriously good food, but we're going to be having a catered lunch. We're going to be talking about making your marriage indestructible, and that is so vital for you and your life with your spouse. And for those of you who aren't married, this would be a great thing for you to be a part of, as far as just coming to learn how to be a better spouse when you meet that special someone and you take those vows and you become married yourself. It's been a great time talking with everybody today. Next week, we'll be back. We're going to be following up on Dave's sermon from this coming Sunday. Don't miss it. We're excited to have these every week, and it's so cool to see the numbers growing as people are continuing to watch these every Wednesday. God bless, and have a great